many of us, we grew up hearing to take the road less traveled, but that to take the road less traveled, it would be harder and it would be lonely, but that is the good road to take. And the more that I step into my healing journey, the more that I realize why this is so. Hey, sweet souls. Welcome to the Rain for Salt podcast, where I'm your host, Sunshine Rain. And this podcast is all about having healing conversations for healing people. Whether you've just started your journey or you've been on it for a while or maybe even a really long while, whether you're deep in the trenches of it or whether you feel that you've come up for air and you've found success and you've been able to move through it. Whether you are the healer or the healing, whether you are imperfectly perfect or whether you're fumbling around in the dark, or whether you have some light to bring to the conversation, I invite you to join in this journey. Make sure to follow along with this podcast every second and fourth Thursday of the month. Make sure to subscribe to whichever avenue or platform best suits you, and to be here. More than anything, show up in this space because I'm so honored and excited to bring to you the stories, the experiences, the tools, the lessons, the blessings, the triumphs that happen in this healing journey. And I'm excited to have you here along for it. So let's get started. For some of us, this healing journey begins at birth. For most of us, this healing journey starts sometime after our teenage years. We need that moment of separating from the conditioning of our parents, our family, our community, our systems, our society, and that becoming into our own self-awareness, our own independence, questioning the things that we have been taught and the things that we've learned, and becoming clearer, finding that clarity, finding that discernment of what is really us. For some people, that might come easier than others. For some, that might be more supported than others. But regardless of where this started for you, I want to welcome and invite you into this space. I want you to know that you belong here, that there is a space, there is a community for you. There are other people out there healing and in their journey of healing that are grateful, blessed, honored, and excited to have you alongside them. Growing up, many of us might have heard to take the road less traveled, that the road less traveled is the more desired path because it's the righteous path, it's the good path. And the further that I get in my own healing, the more that has become abundant why that road is so hard, so tumultuous, so less traveled, because it is the harder road. It is the lonelier road. But I think what a lot of people forget or don't understand in taking the road less traveled is it's not traveled. And less traveled doesn't mean traveled alone. It just means that less people take that road. However, so many of us, when choosing that harder path, choosing to look inward, choosing to heal, choosing to pour love into all those spaces that have been neglected, abandoned, forgotten, thrown aside, that we think somehow that we have to do it alone. And I know that for me, one of the greatest gifts that I received was the gift of hearing someone else's story. I was entering my preteens when a family member gave me Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I can't remember if that came first or after being given Dave Pelzer's A Boy Called It. But the coupling of those two books, and especially Dave Pelzer's writing of his own life, lit something up in me, a knowing of the work that I would be doing. But more so was a resounding echo, a mirror, a reflection of the weight that I felt I had been carrying alone for so long. And where I had felt in many ways maybe isolated with some of the things that I was going through and on the cusp of going through, Dave Pelzer wrote and shared his story. I mean, you do feel terrible reading what he went through, but the way that he shares and the way that you receive the book, for me, was empowering. It's someone who was no longer gripped by the things that they had been through, but was sharing their story from a place of empowerment. And through sharing their story, there was healing. And there was an openness and an awareness and expansion that was happening to broaden your scope, to look beyond yourself and see how many other people were there. Because so many times when we're stuck in the trauma of our own story, we forget that there's somebody else out there willing to hold our hand, to come sit with us in the dark, to light the candle, to help us light our own candle, to hold our own light in that darkness. And it's not that I had an unawareness of other people going through that, but just the importance of someone using their story to reach into my darkness and meet me in that place where I felt so alone. That was empowering. And I've never met the author, although I'd love to. And I've never, had a relationship, friendship, anything like that with this person. But the fact that they shared their story, knowing that it should be shared, using their voice of empowerment, their voice of experience to share what they had gone through, was powerful to me. And so while many of us are on this path of the less traveled, I want to bring something to come alongside you in that. And I highly encourage you to reach out, to connect, to get together in the comments of whatever platform you find this podcast in, because this is a beautiful space for healing if we allow it to be. And I know that for me, one thing that in hearing other people's stories, and I actually want to share a story with you of my own, that when I was young and I was put in therapy or counseling, I honestly don't remember which one because I was so young. I remember we were asked to think about, if you could do one thing in life, like what would you do? And this became a question that ended up being a theme throughout my growing up years of, what would you do if you could do one thing, if you have one passion, right? Like find that one thing that you're passionate about. And I used to think it was, I just want to hear people's stories. I just want to hear about people's lives. People who had gone from victim to valor and allowed us to see even a glimpse into their story, their experience, and the power that storytelling has. I grew up as a child of a storyteller, someone who had immense imagination, someone who could take the present moment and utilize it to navigate the creative mind landscape and to formulate beautiful, creative, imaginative scenery, role play, and loved to storytell. And I grew up loving being a recipient of that. But as a coach, I know that what we do in one area of life, we do in many areas of life. And this applies to both the good and the not so great, the comfortable and the not so comfortable, right? So I also know that how I love to absorb storytelling, and I love to be told stories, and I love to be brought into one's imagination and mind and creativity and thought process. I also love that in a very real human way. So for me, part of my journey and my healing journey is understanding that I thoroughly enjoy holding space, whether that's facilitating an event, whether that's hosting parties or gatherings, whether that's collaborating with other people and holding space for the imagination, for the action, for the creativity, for the perfecting of, whatever it is. I find that I'm continually drawn to these places, these spaces of holding space and sharing voice, sharing wisdom, tools, blessings, triumphs, trials. All of that for me is something I find fascinating. It's like taking back the layers. It's looking for the core and then savoring the flavor the whole way from the outer edges to the core. That's what it feels like for me to hold space, to take in stories. And so as we move through this podcast, as we move forward, and I invite you into this space, I'm going to be inviting along other speakers, people who I admire and adore, people who I respect, who have gifts, who have tools, who've had experience with the dark night of the soul, experience with this journey, experience with healing and various healing modalities, in hopes that sharing their stories, their blessings, their trials and triumphs, their tools, that you too will have something to come alongside you in your journey, that you will feel accompanied even if and even though you are on the road less traveled. And it's so vital for us to remember that less traveled is not alone. There are many people out there doing the work, and we get the opportunity to seek them out, to find them. If someone says something on this podcast that resonates with you, please take it. Please utilize it, because community and connection are so vital in our healing process. And I encourage each one of you not to be a simple spectator or bystander, but to create community here, to have the courage to reach out, to allow yourself to be seen, just as the speakers that I will have on and the guests and myself are allowing you to witness us in our process. This is a really beautiful space for that, and I'm so thrilled and excited to have you here. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being willing to listen to this first episode. Thank you for allowing me to invite you in. I want to encourage you that if you are on that healing journey, that you follow this podcast. There will be new ones every 2 weeks, the second and fourth Thursday of the month. And invite a friend in. Someone else who's on this journey, this path with you, that you feel would benefit from having people, a community, come alongside them. Healing is not for the faint of heart. It is rough, it is hard, and we're already doing so much in our day-to-day life. And then add slowing down and looking within and healing and breaking generational traumas and chains, and talk about starting new patterns, unwinding and rewiring your nervous system, all of these beautiful, wonderful things that we're doing in our normal life. And then you add all of that on top of it, and it is tiresome. And not that it's without beauty, because it's definitely full of joy and laughter and beauty and blessing. But I do know how lonely it can be. And I do know that we all need, regardless of where the pendulum swings, people to come alongside us, to see us, to hear us, to witness us, and people that we can do that for, people that we can listen to, people we can glean from, learn from, expand because of, grow because of. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for liking or subscribing. Thank you for inviting your friends here. And I cannot wait to see you on the next episode.